My name is Rebecca. I'm 30 years old, and I live just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, for as long as I can remember. The hum of power tools and the scent of fresh lumber were part of the background noise of my childhood. While other kids played with dolls or built forts from couch cushions, I sat cross-legged on job site floors, watching concrete get poured and steel beams lifted into place. My father didn't say much, but the way he looked at me, steady, quiet, approving, it planted something deep in me, a belief that one day all of it would be mine. There was never a plan B, no alternate dreams. While my friends talked about becoming architects, marketers, or even travel bloggers, I focused on one thing: learning everything I possibly could about our family's construction company. I studied blueprints at 11, managed office inventory by 13, and interned on live builds before I could even legally drive. I didn't do it for a resume. I did it because I loved it, because I believed in it, and most of all, because I believed my place in it was promised. After graduating top of my class in construction management, I turned down offers from firms in Seattle, Chicago, and Dallas. They had big titles and even bigger salaries, but I didn't even blink. I came straight home and walked through the doors of my father's company, the same way I'd walked into our living room as a child. Like I belonged, no celebration, no pause. I started on a Monday morning and never looked back. I took on the early shifts, turned on the lights during winter when no one else had arrived. I cleaned out decades of paper records, migrated the company to digital platforms, implemented new project tracking systems, streamlined our scheduling process. I wasn't just filing papers or answering phones. I was re-engineering how we functioned. In 4 years, we nearly doubled revenue, reduced our average build time, and improved client retention more than any marketing effort ever had. I remembered every client's anniversary, their kids' names, their favorite type of tile. I knew when suppliers would miss deadlines before they did. I smoothed over late payments, corrected structural estimates, rewrote scopes of work on the fly when subcontractors bailed last minute. I didn't clock in for hours. I clocked in for impact. And yet, my name was never on the signage. It wasn't on the letterhead, not even on the website. What people saw was a smooth-running, modernized construction firm. What they didn't see was the woman staying in the office past midnight, running projections, laying out contingency plans, studying code updates. My apartment was where I slept, not where I lived. My friends stopped asking me to come out years ago. The 2 serious relationships I had ended the same way. You love the company more than you love anyone else. Maybe they were right, but I didn't see it as love. I saw it as loyalty, as responsibility, as legacy. I thought every hour I worked, every holiday I skipped, every detail I perfected, it was all leading somewhere. I didn't ask for praise. I didn't need a corner office or a title on my door. I just needed to know that I was building something that would one day be mine, that everything I gave up was for a future with my name on it. I didn't realize then that you can give everything you have to something and still not be seen as the rightful heir. It started with a phone call from my mother. Just after a quarterly budget meeting, my phone buzzed with her name. She never called during the workday, so I stepped out to answer, half expecting bad news. "Rebecca," she said, soft and strangely upbeat, "your sister's home. Can you come for dinner tonight? The whole family should be together. Just this once. Savannah, 32 years old, 2 years older than me, the golden child who had traded business school for photography classes, who chased light and wanderlust from Bali to Lisbon to New York, rarely staying anywhere longer than a season. She'd missed 10 Thanksgivings, countless Christmases, and every one of my birthdays for nearly a decade. But Suddenly, she was back. No explanation, no warning, just back. That evening, I pulled into my parents' driveway like I had hundreds of times before, but the house already felt different, warmer in the lighting, curated in the way that only Savannah's presence could make things appear intentional and effortless. She greeted me in a flowing white linen dress, hair tied up in a perfectly undone bun, holding a glass of red wine like it was part of her choreography. "You look great," she said, tilting her head with that same bright, confident smile she'd always worn. "I've heard you've basically kept the company alive. Dad talks about you constantly." I smiled politely, more out of habit than agreement. Every company needs someone to keep the wheels turning. "Sure," she nodded, her eyes sparkling. "But I think it could use a little spark too. Some creative magic." I didn't know what she meant at the time. I just assumed it was another one of her poetic observations, the kind she used to post under black and white snapshots of sidewalk cafes. I said nothing. The following Monday, I was called into a side room next to my father's office. Savannah was already there, sipping a cappuccino, legs crossed, her phone face down on the table like she was already running the place. "Rebecca," my father said, "I'd like to introduce Savannah's new role. Starting today, she'll be our brand creative director. She'll help reshape our image. Website, presentations, client outreach, all of it. The market's evolving. It's time we do too." I looked at her. She smiled, soft and steady. Her eyes didn't flinch. Mine didn't either. "That's fine," I said. "I'll have the design team loop her in." But inside, something cracked. For 8 years, I had built the bones of that company. Not the brand, not the story, but the system. I was never introduced with a title or celebrated in team emails. I was the one who picked up the pieces when projects fell apart, the one who stayed during snowstorms, during budget cuts, during a pandemic. And suddenly, Savannah was here, rebranding the image of something she hadn't helped build. By the end of that first month, every meeting began with Savannah's slides, brighter colors, softer fonts, her new logo on every document header. My father, who once fought me for weeks over changing the company's email domain, now praised her ideas as fresh and forward-thinking. He started calling us the perfect succession duo, a phrase that diluted everything I had carried alone. Savannah arrived at 9:30, left by 4, took long lunches, posted filtered photos of team meetings on her Instagram with captions like "creative brilliance in motion, family business vibes." I didn't argue. I didn't complain. I just watched, quietly, as the spotlight shifted. The woman who once skipped Thanksgiving to inspect a job site was now the background figure. The steady hand was being replaced by a well-lit idea of progress. And for the first time, I began to wonder, was the future I built already slipping from my hands? I didn't set out to uncover anything that day. I was in the archive room, following up on a missing scanned contract for the Everpine townhouse development, one of the projects I'd overseen from the first bid to the final design draft. My father told me, almost too quickly, that the original had already been sent to legal for review. "Check the digital system," he said, without meeting my eye. But there was no digital copy, and my father had a rule he'd repeated since I was 17. Never send out the original without making a copy first. So I went down to the basement. The old archive room smelled like dust and ink and something faintly metallic, the kind of scent that only lives in places too full of memory to be abandoned. I moved drawer by drawer, methodical, almost numb. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was something deeper. Then wedged between a land transfer from 2009 and an outdated loan file, I saw it. A black folder, unmarked, slightly worn around the edges. Curious, I pulled it out. The title page read, "Chair Transfer, Morgan and Company Construction, April 17th, 4 months ago." I turned the page and felt the air shift around me. My eyes scanned the first paragraph, and my breath caught in my throat. 72% of company shares transferred to Savannah R. Morgan. 18% retained by Franklin D. Morgan, 10% assigned to Linda R. Morgan. There was no mention of me. Not a line. Not a footnote. Not even a temporary proxy. I read it again. Then again. Stamps. Signatures. Notarized. Witnessed. Final. I reached for the shelving to steady myself. The room suddenly felt too small, like the air had been drained out. My hands were cold. My legs didn't move. All I could do was stand there, document in hand, staring at proof that I wasn't just overlooked, I was erased. A soft knock sounded behind me. It was Eleanor, our longtime office manager. She stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. Her eyes flicked to the folder in my hands, then to my face. "You knew about this," I said. My voice didn't rise, but it was sharp. She didn't speak right away, just sighed, quiet and tired. "Your father planned to tell you after things settled down. Yeah, he thought you'd understand." "Understand what?" I asked. Why he gave away everything to someone who hasn't spent a single day on a build site, who hasn't been here for any of it. She looked at me, and there was something in her eyes, regret, maybe, or guilt. "He thinks the company needs new direction. He says you're too stuck in the old ways." I let out a bitter laugh. "Old ways? You mean surviving 2 recessions, a pandemic, and a dozen broken contracts he let happen?" She said nothing. I brushed past her and went straight to my car, gripping the folder like it might vanish if I let go. I don't remember the drive home. I only remember standing in my living room, still in my coat, staring at that document while the city lights came on one by one outside. Every sacrifice, every night I slept on the office couch, every deal I'd closed while others were on vacation. I had done it for something I believed was mine, not because it was handed to me, but because I earned it. But in that moment, I realized the truth. I wasn't excluded. I was never even considered. I didn't scream, I didn't throw things. I didn't demand answers or force a confrontation. That wasn't my style. Not then. Not yet. Instead, I sat alone in my apartment that night. The black folder still open on the coffee table like a wound that hadn't stopped bleeding. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. Then I turned on my laptop. Not to work, not to fix anything, but to end it. I opened my email, composed a message addressed to my father, CC'd Human Resources, and marked it with a neutral subject line: resignation effective immediately. I didn't add an explanation. I didn't ask for acknowledgement. I simply wrote that I would no longer be continuing in my role, and that transition details could be discussed later if needed. Then I hit send. No part of me hesitated. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, as I always did. But I didn't reach for my laptop. I didn't get dressed for the office. For the first time in years, I didn't have anywhere to be. There was no early meeting, no estimate to finalize, no crisis waiting for me before I'd had my first cup of coffee. But around 11, my phone buzzed. It was Eleanor. "They're presenting the Everpine project," she said, voice low. "You might want to come see this." I didn't reply. I just got in the car and drove. My old badge still worked. I swiped into the building like a ghost, familiar with every creak in the floor, every framed blueprint on the hallway walls. Eleanor met me near conference room 2, cracked the door just enough so I could see without being seen. Savannah was standing at the head of the table, a large screen behind her. She wore a soft cream blazer, her hair tied neatly, voice steady with confidence. "The Everpine project," she began, "focuses on sustainable living for young families in the southern suburbs of Atlanta. A 4-phase rollout across 26 months with financial allocation at 30, 40, 30. I didn't breathe. She clicked through slide after slide. Market segmentation, design renderings, risk analysis, revenue projections. Every single element was mine: the layout, the phrasing, even the soft mint green headers I had used to distinguish the phases. They were all still there. She hadn't changed a thing, except one, in the bottom corner of each slide, where my initials had once sat in tiny gray font, now read Savannah R. Morgan, Creative Director. I stood there, completely still, while she walked the room through my work like it was hers. She fielded questions, nodded thoughtfully, even referenced her team and the long hours they'd put in. But I knew the truth. There had been no team. There had been no long hours from her. That project had been mine, developed late at night on the office couch, built piece by piece over coffee-stained notebooks and revised drafts. I had pitched it to my father months ago. He called it unrealistic, said the market wasn't ready, told me to shelve it. And now, there it was, unchanged, just retitled. I didn't stay for the applause. I didn't even wait for her to finish. I walked out quietly, passing by my old office without looking inside. Back in the car, my hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. But this time, the shaking wasn't from grief. It was something else, something sharper, more focused. I wasn't going to fight for a seat they had already pulled away. I was going to make sure they remembered exactly what they lost when I walked away. I didn't call to chat. I called to give him a choice. My father answered on the third ring, his voice as steady as ever, like nothing in the world could touch him. I told him to meet me at a cafe on 5th Street, neutral ground, not the office, not the house, no shared history to soften the edges. He didn't ask questions. He just said, tomorrow, 6 p.m. I got there early, chose a table by the window. I didn't order coffee. I wasn't there for comfort. I brought my laptop, a plain notebook, and a flash drive in my pocket that held everything: dates, files, slide decks, internal emails, every single piece of evidence that tied the Everpine project to me. At 6 sharp, he walked in, wearing the same navy windbreaker he always wore when he wanted to look casual but in control. I didn't smile. I didn't stand. I pointed to the seat across from me. He sat. I opened my laptop, split the screen. On the left was the original Everpine pitch deck, created 3 months ago, with my initials on every page and timestamps embedded in the metadata. On the right was the version Savannah had presented, identical down to the wording, charts, structure, and color scheme. He looked at the screen. His face stayed still, but his jaw tightened. What do you want? Rebecca. I leaned forward. I want to know who gave Savannah permission to take my work and present it as hers. He didn't answer. And if you're going to say this was a joint effort or some kind of misunderstanding, I will print every draft, every email rejection, every internal version I sent through my account, and bring it to the Everpine investors. He exhaled slowly. Rebecca, this was a strategic decision. You're good at execution, she's good at presentation. I wanted to combine both strengths. I didn't blink. You stole from me, put her name on it, and called it strategy. He held my gaze, but his silence was louder than any argument. I reached into my coat pocket and placed the flash drive on the table. This holds everything. If you want to keep this quiet, you have 48 hours. After that, I go public, starting with an email to Everpine's lead partners, then the local construction press, then the investors we've been courting for 2 years. He stared at the flash drive like it might detonate. What do you want? I didn't pause. Remove Savannah's name from the project. Issue a formal apology in writing. And don't insult me by calling this an overreaction. He leaned back, tension creeping into the way he gripped his coffee cup. You're pushing this too far. I stood. No, I said quietly. I'm just done playing small so someone else can feel big. I paused, met his eyes one more time. I'm not the daughter who stays late under fluorescent lights just to be called hardworking anymore. Then I turned and walked out, leaving the flash drive on the table between us like a mirror he'd have to stare into. For the first time in my life, I didn't walk away feeling small. I walked away knowing I had finally stepped into my power, and that now he'd have to reckon with it. I didn't hear anything from my father for 2 full days after I walked out of that cafe. No emails, no calls, no silence-breaking messages trying to explain things away. But on the 3rd day, I got an email. Not from him, but from Savannah. Subject line, "Please meet me." It was short. She said she couldn't justify what had happened. She wanted to meet, not for the company, but to understand, to talk. I didn't respond right away, not out of pettiness, but because I knew better now. Words were cheap. I wasn't interested in apologies if they didn't come with accountability. But later that night, while clearing out a drawer, I found an old company roadmap I'd written when I was 26. It was marked in red ink, my father's. He had tossed it aside without comment. I opened my laptop and replied, "Tomorrow morning, 8, Maple and Pine Cafe." She was already there when I arrived, sat near the window, hands wrapped around a cappuccino she hadn't touched. I gave her a nod, nothing more, and took a seat. She didn't waste time. "You were right," she said. "Everpine wasn't mine. I followed Dad's lead, and I didn't push back. I was wrong. I let her speak." Her voice trembled more from guilt than fear. She admitted that she had never opened my original files, but she hadn't needed to. Dad had given her everything ready-made. Then came the real reason she'd called me. "Dad's talking about asking you to come back." I raised an eyebrow. "Because he thinks the old ways might save the ship now that it's sinking." She flinched. "No. Because he knows you're the only one who can fix it." I stood, ready to leave. If he wants a conversation, it should come from him, not through you. She stopped me with a sentence that changed everything. He said if you agree to return, he's willing to transfer a portion of his shares. I turned slowly. "How much?" 15%, she said, quietly. "And a deputy executive title." I almost laughed. I'm not coming back to be second in command under a failed creative director. I sat back down and pulled out the page I had already prepared. "These are the terms: 40% equity, a voting board seat, executive title, equal to or higher than yours, full control over the Everpine project, if it's still salvageable." She stared at the paper like the number 40 was written in another language. I didn't blink. "I kept the company alive for almost a decade. You've been here 11 months, 7 of which were spent posting color palettes and drinking iced lattes." She nodded slowly. "I'll tell him." 2 hours later, my phone rang. A blocked number. I answered. My father's voice came through, rough but composed. "We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about without lawyers and a signed agreement." I said, calm, unmoving, "You're pushing this too far." "No, I'm finally playing by the rules." A beat of silence. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Harold's office. That next morning, I walked into the law office in a smoke gray suit, my hair pulled back, carrying a folder of documents, project records, revenue growth, signed client endorsements, proof. I wasn't asking to return. I was proving I never left. Harold sat at the head of the table, my father across from me, my mother beside him. Savannah was not in the room. "Rebecca?" Harold began. "We've reviewed your terms." I nodded. "Then you know I won't accept anything less." My father didn't speak for a moment. Then he leaned forward, extended his hand. "Let's start over." I looked at it, the hand that had once guided mine to hold a hammer, now trembling slightly. Still, I reached out, not as his daughter, but as his equal, his partner. The deal was signed 1 hour later, 40% equity, a voting board seat, executive authority over Everpine. This wasn't me returning to a role. This was me rewriting the power structure from the inside. 2 weeks after signing the deal, I walked back into Morgan and Company, not as an employee, not as a shadow, but as its chief operating officer and co-owner. 40% equity, a voting seat on the board, full executive authority over the Everpine project. For the first time in over a decade, I didn't walk through those doors with tension in my chest. I didn't feel the need to prove anything. Because now, my place wasn't just understood. It was inked, filed, and legally recognized. The office looked the same, but everything had changed. And I intended to rebuild it from the ground up, not just in systems, but in soul. The first thing I did was dismantle the grind culture. No more unpaid late nights. No more just one more revision emails at 10 p.m. I implemented a clear workweek policy, 45 hours. No exceptions unless pre-approved. Not because I wanted to soften the team, but because people aren't machines. They're builders, like I was. And no one should burn themselves out for a company that doesn't even know their middle name. Next came executive meetings. Gone were the 3-hour lectures and old-school monologues about real-world experience. I restructured them into clear, concise discussions with action-based agendas. Every voice in the room had time to speak. Even the interns were encouraged to present. Data started driving our decisions. Gut feelings were reserved for marketing, not for multi-million-dollar build strategies. As for Savannah, I didn't push her out. I did something harder. I created boundaries. Her role was redefined, clearly. Branding, visual identity, and customer experience fell under her purview. She no longer had a say in financial planning, project operations, or legal strategy. And to her credit, she didn't fight it. We began meeting once a week over coffee in my office. I called them coffee and context sessions. Not lectures, not power plays, just time to walk her through the things no one had taught her: how to read a risk matrix, how to evaluate a scope of work, how to identify red flags in contractor bids. At first, she bristled, once she even snapped. Why does everything have to be so complicated? I smiled. Because complexity is what kept this company alive while everyone else was posting inspiration quotes. She didn't have a reply, but she kept showing up. And slowly, she started taking notes, asking better questions. Most importantly, she learned when to pause and listen. A month later, I received an email from Eleanor Wynn, lead investor for the Everpine project. Subject line, reconsideration. The message was short. We're open to renegotiation. On the condition that the project is led solely by Rebecca Morgan. I printed it and pinned it to the bulletin board in the main operations room. The office went silent for a moment. Then the applause started. Not for me, but for what it meant. We were back in the race. My father returned as a part-time advisor, 3 days a week, mostly reading reports. Sometimes he walked into meetings and looked lost, surrounded by the very systems he used to resist. He no longer ran the company. He simply watched it evolve beyond him. I didn't exile him. I just made the boundaries clear. He could still be my father, but he was no longer my boss. Morgan and Company wasn't just surviving anymore. It was finally becoming something I could believe in again. Because this time, it was built on my terms. 3 months after I walked back in, we re-signed Everpine with a revised scope and a $2 million expansion. The project that was once dismissed as too risky was now our flagship. Not because we changed the vision, but because we finally let the right person lead it. 4 former clients, ones we thought we'd lost to bigger firms, reached out again. 2 new investors pitched partnership offers, citing transparency and leadership stability as their reason. For the first time, people weren't just investing in the Morgan name, they were investing in how we ran things. And that felt different. It felt earned. My office isn't the corner suite my father used to occupy. I had it redesigned entirely. Natural light filters in through wide windows. A dark wood desk sits in the center, clean and uncluttered. Behind me, a tall bookshelf holds binders, market reports, and 3 worn notebooks I used during our most difficult years. And on the wall, framed in matte black, hangs the very first sketch I made for Everpine, edges wrinkled, one corner still stained with a coffee ring from the night I almost gave up on it. Next to it is a small handwritten note from Eleanor Wynne, taped quietly in the corner. Your consistency is what kept everything standing. I look at that frame every morning when I walk in, and every night before I leave, not because I need the reminder, but because it anchors me to the truth. Not everyone will see your worth from the beginning, but if you stay steady, if you stay clear, you will build something no one can take away from you. Savannah still holds her title, creative director, but she stays in her lane. She leads branding and client experience. And to her credit, she does it well. We meet regularly. We still have disagreements, but now there's structure. There's respect. And most importantly, there's no confusion about who leads the operation. My father keeps to his advisory role. He still walks the halls sometimes, slower now, more reflective. Occasionally, I catch him lingering outside meeting rooms, listening. He knows what I've built, and I think, in his own quiet way, he's proud, even if he'll never say the words out loud. But I don't need him to, because I'm no longer asking for acknowledgement. I'm no longer proving myself to people who once overlooked me. Morgan and Company is no longer the legacy I protected out of loyalty. It's the company I rebuilt with intention, with new values, with new terms, with a new kind of leadership, one that doesn't demand power, but earns it. And me? I'm not the forgotten daughter standing in someone else's spotlight. I'm Rebecca Morgan. The one who didn't wait to be given power, I claimed it.